Chapter 2. Growing Up Italian. I didn't really understand what it was to be Italian until we moved to our second home on Long Island, in the town of Farmingdale. This was near the border of Nassau and Suffolk counties, and our neighborhood was filled with Italian families and lots of kids who were about the same age as my brother and me. My grandparents on my mother's side lived just down the block from us, convinced to move out of the Bronx and live near us. Most of our extended family lived close by, aunts and uncles and numerous cousins, plus my parents' friends from the city who had also decided to move out to the island. For reasons unknown to me and my brother, our house somehow became a central meeting place for pinochle games, barbecues, and informal get-togethers. I'm sure this also happens in other cultures, but I quickly found out it is central to the Italian experience. My mother always had a coffee cake and a pot of coffee on the stove for whenever company might come over. My brother and I were forbidden to eat any of that coffee cake. My mother would always warn us it was only for company. It became a normal occurrence to have neighbors just drop in or for Grandma and Grandpa to walk in quite unannounced. Speaking of visitors, our neighborhood was filled with vendor trucks delivering all sorts of things. I don't know if they only came to the Italian neighborhoods, but I like to think that they were there just for us. There was the beer and soda man, whose truck was filled with all the great brands of soda: Hoffman's root beer and cream soda, Canada Dry ginger ale that my mother liked, and Pabst Blue Ribbon beer that my father got by the case. My grandmother was a big fan of Tab soda, which was the first sugar-free soda, and she also got seltzer in those heavy pressurized glass bottles with a nozzle on top. The beer and soda man was a huge hit in our neighborhood, and every house always put in a large order when he came around once a week. We also had an Entenmann's delivery truck that brought all of their great cakes and donuts right to the house. And then there was the bleach man. He sold glass-gallon jugs of bleach from his truck. That's all he sold, and my mother would buy 4 gallons at a time. It's hard to imagine using that much bleach, but somehow she did. Our laundry always smelled of bleach. Some of the other vendors in our neighborhood were the Fuller Brush man, who sold all manner of household cleaning supplies, brooms and dustpans, the Avon lady, who sold cosmetics and beauty supplies, and, of course, the milkman, who delivered us quarts of milk in glass bottles with the cardboard tab pop top. The milk order was written on a piece of paper and placed into the milk box on our front steps, and he would come every few days to fill our order. My brother and I always looked forward to these vendors coming to our house, and we pretty much had their schedule memorized. One other vendor who also came to our house was Vitale's Dry Cleaners. They would pick up any clothes that needed to be dry cleaned and bring them back within a week, all cleaned and pressed. The local liquor store also made house deliveries. My grandfather, who loved drinking wine, would have a case of Colombo Barbarone red wine delivered to their house. A case consisted of 4-gallon jugs, which would last him about 3 to 4 weeks. He would drink wine with just about every meal and never seemed to be without a glass. Yet despite that, he was never drunk. He told me he had grown up in Italy drinking wine, and it was as natural as breathing. Years later, mostly out of nostalgia for my grandparents, I tried finding this same wine, but I was told it wasn't made anymore. My grandfather also had a knack for eating the hottest peppers imaginable. I could never understand how he was able to do that. I tried them once and nearly fainted from the heat in my mouth. He told me that this was how they cured colds and fevers. They would eat the hot peppers and sweat the cold out of their bodies. He might have been onto something there. With all of these vendors, our neighborhood was always humming with activity. It was unapologetically loud. Mothers calling to their kids to come home for dinner, kids yelling and playing ball in the street, and then there'd be my parents, who were known to fight and yell and argue. Sometimes they got so loud my brother and I would get embarrassed, knowing the neighbors could hear them yelling, but my parents couldn't care less what the neighbors thought. Oddly enough, they were able to make friends with just about everyone on our block, and to the neighbors, they seemed really nice people who'd go out of their way to help anybody in need. I would watch this dichotomy of behavior with interest. Inside the walls of our house, with the 4 of us, things could get pretty intense. But after I had returned home from running away, there were times when things would mellow out, and my father would ask me to help him out on a construction project or pouring concrete for one of the neighbors. He tried including my brother Robert on occasion, but Robert had zero interest in learning any of this. It was during these times working together that I began to see why my father was the way he was. His father, my grandfather, was a concrete mason worker who plied his trade in Italy, and he found work in that trade in the Bronx. I learned that many Italians who immigrated to the United States were skilled in building trades, and my grandfather taught these skills to my father, who never finished high school but chose to go to work instead. He would often point out buildings he had worked on when we drove into the city. There was the hospital he had helped put the brickwork on, an apartment building he'd helped put the roof on, and there was an office building where he installed hundreds of glass blocks. I could see he was proud of his work and of helping to be part of building New York City. He was a tough man who, unbeknownst to me at the time, was instilling a strong work ethic in me. He did not suffer fools easily, even amongst other family members. He expected you to follow directions, which he gave you just once, and that was it. He held me to a high standard. If I was going to do a job, I'd better do it right, and make no excuses if it wasn't done right. It was during these times with him that I learned how to build things, how to handle tools, how to fix broken appliances. In short, how to be a handyman. I was just starting high school, and I was looking forward to taking metal and wood shop. Of course, I knew my father would be my toughest critic, so I always put my very best effort into whatever projects we were doing in class, not just to get a good grade, but to please my father and show him I could do a good job. I began to realize that pleasing my parents was always a slippery slope. If I got an A, it was expected. If it was anything less, I'd better concentrate and focus on getting that A next time around. Usually, my father stayed out of the day-to-day arguments that my mother seemed to revel in. Even though she could be normal at times and back off from criticism and abuse, that threat always seemed to linger just around the corner. Of course, everything was all warm and fuzzy whenever relatives came to visit, most of all on holidays. Thanksgiving was the most memorable. That's when the women would get together in the kitchen and start cooking all their great dishes. Thanksgiving in an Italian house is a unique event shared by few other nationalities. To say it was an event is underestimating its impact. It lasted all day, and I mean all day. Company would come over around noon for a 1 p.m. start to the dinner. The prep had been going on for quite some time. My mother, grandmother, and an aunt or two would be in the kitchen preparing all manner of dishes. There'd be at least 12 adults at the dinner table, and another table set up for us kids. We'd always start off with a fruit salad or grapefruit halves. Then we'd have soup, usually escarole with meatballs in a chicken stock soup. After that, we'd have the antipasta, which would consist of lettuce, tomatoes, roasted red peppers, olives, ham, prosciutto, anchovies, mozzarella cheese, whatever else my mother wanted to put on it. It was a meal in itself. Of course, there were several loaves of hot, crisp Italian bread, along with plenty of wine to go along with all of that. After that, we'd usually take a little break, watch some football on TV, or us kids would go outside to play. Then we'd come back inside for the second go-round, which was the macaroni dishes. This always changed according to what my mother or grandmother wanted to serve. It could be ravioli, or stuffed manicotti, or baked ziti, or just spaghetti. Served along with the macaroni would be a huge dish of meatballs, sausages, braciole, and more Italian bread and wine. Then we'd take another break while dishes were cleared and wait for the next course. By this time, the kids would go outside to play football or play games. It'd be about 4:30 by now, just getting dark. If there was snow on the ground, we'd be having a snowball fight. Then my mother would call us in to come in for the next course. This would be the big main course, and we'd have a huge turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, green beans, creamed spinach, cranberry sauce, lots of bread, and more wine. For most people, this would be all that they had for their Thanksgiving dinner. For us, it was just a third course. After getting through all that, we'd clear the dinner plates and have dessert, where we'd always have Italian pastries, homemade cookies, assorted nuts, tangerines, and coffee with anisette. By now it'd be about 7 o'clock, and everyone would be gathered in the living room to watch some TV or to play cards. By 9 o'clock, everyone would start leaving, and we'd be left alone again to clean up and put the house back together again. I must say, I miss those days. The whole family together, my brother and I playing around with our cousins, the camaraderie, the laughs, the fun we all had together. They're all gone now. Slowly, people began moving away. By the time I got out of high school, half of our extended family had moved to California, deciding there was a better life to be had out west. Many of my cousins went off to school or got married, starting their own families. And of course, aunts and uncles and grandparents began to pass away. I realized that my grandparents were the ones holding all of us together. One by one they died, and with them, the childhood I had known was gone. Years later, when I started teaching around the country, I was invariably asked where I was from. When I told the students New York City, they put two and two together and said that with my Italian name being from New York City, I must be in the mob. I would laugh at them, telling them this wasn't true, but in retrospect, we were never far from that world. Our neighborhood in Farmingdale and a town next to us, Massapequa, had a number of mafia families, and all of us knew who the mafia kids were in school. Of course, we wouldn't say anything about them, but we all knew. My father had gotten to be friends with a family in Massapequa. His name was Vito, and his two boys were the same age as me and Robert, so we always looked forward to visiting them and playing games with their kids. We would visit them once a week, and it became a regular thing. My brother Robert had recently gotten interested in playing electric guitar, but my father didn't have the money to buy one. However, when he mentioned this to Vito, Vito told him that he could get him one at discount. Now, all we knew about Vito was that he worked as a longshoreman at the docks in the city. My father, not sure about how he was going to get a guitar, told Vito that he'd be interested in him getting us a guitar. And so, the following week when we visited, there was a brand new guitar waiting for Robert. Now, my father was the kind of guy who didn't believe in charity. He told Vito he would pay for the guitar. Vito didn't want any money, but my father insisted. They finally settled on a reduced price. My brother started practicing on the guitar, and we thought this was the greatest thing ever. And then suddenly, the visits to Vito stopped. First one week, then another, and another. Finally, after asking numerous times why we weren't going to visit them anymore, we found out why. It turns out that Vito was helping fence stolen goods for the mob. As a longshoreman, he was responsible for unloading the ships from Japan. He knew a shipment of guitars was coming in, and the mob had already told him that there were a few that they had requisitioned. Vito, seeing the guitars, took one from my brother and kept it on the side for himself. A week later, when the mob was doing their accounting, they come up one guitar short and traced it back to Vito. He told them that he didn't do anything with it, it must be an error, but apparently someone had seen him take it and Vito was caught. He was found floating in the East River with 6 bullet holes in his back. The mob had gotten their justice. I was shaken when I heard this. My father quickly got rid of the guitar. I never found out what he did with it, and we never visited there again. My brother felt guilty as hell. If he hadn't wanted a guitar, Vito would still be alive. After that, he never went back to learning to play the guitar. I felt really bad for Vito's kids and his wife, a really warm and friendly woman who always treated me and Robert as her own kids. Now her kids would have to grow up without a father, and she'd have to figure out how to be a single mother. I've never forgotten that, how in the space of an instant your whole life can change. As I've grown older and have a family of my own, I look back upon those days with some nostalgia. Sure, there was the constant yelling and beatings and put-downs, but in between, there were some genuinely fun times, mostly with my brother, but also with my cousins and helping my father with jobs around the house, helping my grandfather tend to his large garden. Italians love gardens. And playing ball with the neighborhood kids on the block. I guess that all helped shape me into the person I am today. My childhood wasn't anything special, and I had to navigate some emotionally lonely times, but somehow I made it out okay, I think. Only time would tell.